I'm Lil Elmo, and I'm here to tell y'all all about my bona fide giant shrimp gumbo. What's a gumbo, I hear you ask? Well, my friends, it's only the cornerstone of Cajun cooking. It's a thick seafood stew filled with okra, sausage, and pretty much any critter you can lay your hands on. If it flies, swims, or crawls, it can go in the gumbo pot. This right here is my special recipe, made with only the finest giant shrimp this side of Infant Island. It's boiled with only the best Cajun spices to kick it up a notch. Bam! So come on down to my restaurant and try a bowl. And like they say down in New Orleans, laissez les bon temps rouler, let the good times roll.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Kaiju Weekly, the weekly podcast that introduces you to the wide world of giant monster movies. I am your host, Travis, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Michael.
What's up, everybody?
Oh, we finally got started. We had a few false starts here, but we finally got it going.
I told you, Travis, we should have used that as a blooper reel, but whatever. It is what it is.
Yeah, well, I don't think we need to extend our episodes any longer than they already are.
That's true. That's true.
In fact, we are packed to the gills this episode with a lot of great things, seeing as it's Sea Monster Month. Hint, hint, gills.
But
and so we're going to dive right into the news.
Cue the beady beady.
Cue the beady beady. So our first bit of news comes to us from ourselves. We're gonna talk about the results of the last Kaiju Clash.
Oh,
so,
nice.
Michael, you want to share with the class what the results of the last Kaiju Clash was?
Absolutely. And I'm going to say winner, winner, chicken dinner. Because in the last episode or last segment of Kaiju Clash, we had two titans of both Toho and Daiei going head to head. The first one being Biollante from the Toho side and Mother Legion from Daiei, the Gamera franchise. So the results from the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group, it was 39 votes to 18 votes in favor of Biollante. And I'm just going to go through here really quickly and read some of the comments. Raul Thakur wrote, Biollante is immortal and can evolve like Shin does. She'll lose the first fight but win the second, which is pretty much what I said when we were doing our Kaiju Clash. James Jackson then added, underneath Raul's comment, she also has the spirit of a human. We are inexorable, there we go, in a sticky situation, which means we have the ability to prevail even when things look terrible. Michael Edwards wrote, I love Biollante, but Legion would annihilate almost any opponent.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna, no. We're just gonna disregard that one. And
well.
Raiden IKEA, or not IKEA, I'm sorry.
IKEA.
Not IKEA. Akita, Raiden Akita, I love you, man. He's one of the moderators for the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group. He's a wonderful guy. He said, pretty sure that Legion would win, if for no other reason than the bomb. So, it was sort of split between at least in the comment section, it was sort of split between Legion and Biollante, but overall, the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group voted in favor of Biollante, 39 votes to 18.
Yeah, and so, we also posted it on the Kaiju Weekly Twitter, and we had 22 votes on there. 63.6% went to Legion, and 36.4% went to Biollante, which means that 14 to Legion and 8 to Biollante. So Legion won out on Twitter. We had a couple of comments. Alex Sperling said, I love Biollante, but her weakness to energy and heat projectiles makes her weak to Legion's many energy-based attacks. Her roots work to break down armor, but I doubt she can fight the two-pronged attack of the Legion Queen and her swarm at the same time. Henry, the host of It Came From a Monster Movie, said, I haven't listened, but Legion, though granted they probably would like to cross-pollinate Biollante and have a whole spooky ecosystem set up, which is
sound interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's a I don't know. Well, you who's so against kaiju shipping, but yet you're okay with Biollante and Legion cross-pollinating.
I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth.
And then Alex Cornett, co-host of Monsters vs. Men and the 13th Floor podcast, commented saying, listen, as much as I love Biollante, she got breathed on a little bit and died.
By that bad goji breath. Yep.
Yep. And then we also had one comment on our YouTube channel where we posted the Kaiju Clash as a separate video. Says it's from David Brown. I say Queen Legion would own Biollante. And then he said, great video, guys. We've got a new subscriber. Thank you very much, David Brown, for subscribing. And I want to make sure and encourage everyone who listens to this to please go and subscribe to the Kaiju Weekly YouTube channel, because we have grown on every platform except for YouTube. YouTube, we're just kind of stalling out. And so I would like to see us grow on there. In fact, I would like to see us maybe reach 100 subscribers by the end of June. Don't know if that's going to happen, but let's see if we can do it.
Thank you so much, David.
Yeah, thank you, David. Bottom line is Biollante won, but barely.
I wouldn't say barely. I mean, it wasn't a landslide like I was hoping for, but I wouldn't say barely.
I told you when we went into that fight, probably, I don't think we recorded it, but I told you when we went into it that I thought Biollante was going to win just because Biollante is the more popular kaiju. So,
well, it's good to know that people also agree with me that Biollante is probably the more powerful, not just the most popular between the two.
Boo, I think you're wrong. But anyway.
Well, just wait till we do the next one, Travis. You'll see.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so now getting into the actual news. We've got the first bit of news, which is for the first time ever, Western fans can enjoy the complete adventures of Ultraman Z, the new Ultraman series and his allies in storage. The entire series on YouTube after each episode airs on TV in Japan. And then they're going to take it off of YouTube after 2 weeks. So if you are interested in watching Ultraman Z or Ultraman Z, then you have to go to the Subaraya Subaraya Productions YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
There'll be a link in the show notes, don't worry.
Yeah, we'll put a link in there for you to go and check out and watch along with everyone who is watching it. But like I said, after 2 weeks, the episodes are taken down, so you have 2 weeks to watch each new episode. Michael, we both watched the first episode. Do you want to just do your initial reactions to the show? We're not going to do a deep dive review of it because we're probably going to save that for like a bonus episode in the future.
Sure. My initial reactions were, it was awesome. I liked it a lot. That's really all I can say, because, the episode got off to a really quick start. It opens up literally with a monster attack from Gami's. The new robot from the new storage robot looks fantastic. The suit does look phenomenal, and so does the Ultraman Z suit. That outfit looks phenomenal as well. And we got to see this brand new alien shark kaiju that was previewed a few months back. And let me tell you, that beast is pretty powerful. And so the episode overall was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to watching along with everybody else. It's really a unique opportunity.
Yeah, I am so glad. We've been saying for about a month now, we hope that they'll simulcast it somewhere where we can watch it. And so I'm glad that we have this news that we can do that. So I think we're going to try to do a bonus episode coming up soon for where we can review the first episode for, give our full first impressions and everything. But just like you, I had a lot of fun with it. It is a lot of fun. So I encourage anyone who is interested in Ultraman to go and check it out. The next bit of news, we've got a lot of Ultraman news this week.
Which is kind of weird. It's kind of weird to have all this Ultraman news, but yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. So the next bit of Ultraman news is after months of intense anticipation, Marvel has revealed the Rise of Ultraman #1, and it's going to be released in comic shops this September. Featuring a stunning main cover from legendary artist Alex Ross, Marvel's upcoming series will reimagine the classic beginnings of one of the biggest worldwide pop culture icons, Ultraman. And so that cover by Alex Ross is the regular cover, and then they also have 9 variants. Which also includes a blank one. They usually do blank covers for these as a variant. So, that's the news. Michael, what are your thoughts on this?
Looks amazing. I'm actually looking forward to getting my first issue. So, yeah, I mean, I will definitely be reading this.
Yeah. Now there was a one of the variants that was revealed. I can't remember. I gotta pull it up and see.
It was it was a close-up shot of Ultraman with Spider-Man on his shoulder.
I was trying to remember which artist it was though that did that one. I can't remember. Chris from Gargantucast, help me. Because but anyway, I forget which artist did that one, but anyway, that variant cover, I will take all of them, please. Just like give me all of them. Yes, my body is ready for this. As a comic book fan, as a Marvel fan, as an Ultraman fan, give it to me now.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
From what I have heard and what I've read, Ultraman is not expected to cross over with any Marvel characters in the Marvel universe. Not to say it won't happen, but just from what I've read, it's not being planned. This is more of like a tribute to the fact that now Marvel has Ultraman, and so kind of like a celebration by having him featured on, having some of their characters featured on the cover with Ultraman. And covers don't usually, especially variant covers, don't always tell you what's going on inside the book. They're more just for fun.
Okay, so I was just curious because I saw the artwork come across Twitter, excuse me, and I was thinking to myself, that sounds silly. Do I really want? I mean, I like Spider-Man, but I'm not the biggest Spider-Man fan. Do I really want Spider-Man and Ultraman to be in the same issue? So
yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. I don't think they're going to be crossing over, just because, like what I've said, what I've read on the interwebs, it doesn't look like that's the plan. But you never say never, because you never know. But let's talk about that Alex Ross cover for a second too, though, because the Alex Ross cover looks just amazing, absolutely. And it's for anybody who knows comic books, it's no secret that Alex Ross, I mean, he's one of the best artists that exists. But I do want to let everyone know, do not feel like this is what the interior artwork is going to look like, because this is not, Alex Ross is not an interior comic book artist. He does not do interior arts. He does covers. He does a lot of promo art, but he does not do interiors anymore. The artist that is doing it, and I had his name written down and I lost it. Now I don't know what I did with it. But he is an artist that's worked on other books. He's worked on an Avengers book. He's worked on the new Fantastic Four book that's been going on, and his style is more stylized. It's more cartoony.
Okay.
Than the Alex Ross one. So I don't want people getting their hopes up saying, "Oh, this artwork on this cover looks amazing. This is what the entire issue is going to look like." It's like, no, that's not what the interior art is going to look like. That's not to say that the interior art isn't going to look great, but just don't expect it to look the same.
Well, that's a little disappointing because when I saw that cover, excuse me, I was thinking, because I am admittedly new to the comic book world. That is something that I really never got into growing up, but I saw the cover and the cover is beautiful. So I'm thinking, man, these are going to be such beautiful books, such beautiful issues. So you're saying that don't expect the same level. I mean, the quality level is still going to be high, but don't expect the same type of artwork or the same level of artwork as, say, what the front cover is going to indicate.
Right. Yeah. Especially because that Alex Ross cover, Alex Ross, like, he paints very realistic images. Like that's his style. He's very realistic, and he hand paints it all. The artist that's doing the interiors is very stylized. He's kind of more inspired by manga art. So he's kind of got the a little bit more exaggerated style to him, and he doesn't do colors. They have a colorist that's going to come in and do the colors, so the colors will be added digitally to it.
Okay.
So it's going to be more stylized, and I actually have examples of his art that I picked up online that I'm going to send to you at some point. I'll send to you soon to let you see what the interior looks like. But yeah, it's not going to be that realistic hand painted look that Alex Ross does, because that's just, he doesn't do that. He doesn't do interiors anymore, and that's not who's working on the interiors.
Okay. So it's sort of like how Matt Frank is both a cover artist and an interior artist. You're saying that that's not always the case. It's not always the person doing the cover art that's also doing the interior art, and vice versa.
Yeah, and more often than not, especially with smaller books and more personal books, it's usually one person doing it all. But with these big companies like Marvel and DC, they're more often than not, it's going to be a separate artist doing the cover than it's doing the interiors. And sometimes the interiors are even split between multiple artists, depending on the size of the book.
So since I'm the noob and you are more of the expert when it comes to this, what would you guess the price point and release schedule is going to be like really quickly?
I'm pretty positive that this is going to be a monthly book. I know that Marvel does double billing sometimes, double shipping for some of their books, but I don't think that's usually reserved for some of their bigger titles. So this one's more than likely going to be a monthly title, and it's going to probably sit around $3.99 or $4.99 USD per book.
Okay.
And I don't know exactly how long the series is going to run, but the typical run length of most series nowadays is 12 issues. So I can see this being a 12-issue run, unless it's intended to be shorter.
Okay. I was just curious. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun. I know I'll be picking up the issues myself because I'm super interested, because as we've talked about before, we're both on our ultra journey, and so this is just going to be a part of it.
Yeah. One of the alternative covers that they haven't revealed what it looks like yet, but they did say who's working on it, is Scotty Young. And I really like Scotty Young's covers because he does very chibi style characters. So like he'll do a very chibi looking cutesy, very just so adorable looking
Okay.
Ultraman that I'm just looking forward to seeing what he does with that. So yeah, and then we're moving on to the next bit of news, which is again more Ultraman news. Mill Creek Entertainment is to drop the Birth of Ultraman collection July 10th, 2020. Now, this is a Blu-ray set that contains some of the best episodes of the original Ultraman series, with both the original Japanese language and the classic English dub. Price is around $19.99 USD and will be available July 10th. This is also going to include the pre-premiere, which was a premiere episode that they basically threw together to help spread the word about the show. Back in 1966, that aired ahead of the show actually coming to air. And so they're going to be showing that or having that on the Blu-ray set as well.
Yeah, this looks like, well, I was just gonna say this looks super interesting, and I really wasn't expecting it, honestly.
Yeah, it is kind of weird. Now I have a message that came through from one of our Patreons, Thorax, and he asked the question, how do you feel about the Ultraman pre-premiere being put on a separate compilation Blu-ray? I feel that this special feature should have been included on the original release Mill Creek put out a few months ago. I'm still getting it though. And he does bring up a good point there. The English dub audio and this premiere thing that's getting added, why weren't those added to the original Blu-ray set that came out just a few months ago?
Because this release was probably pre-planned, and so it's just, I don't want to sound cynical and say it was a money grab, but it's probably an excuse just to release an extra product. Because excuse me, if they would have put both the English dub and the subtitled versions on the same Blu-rays that we've been getting so far, there would be no point in putting out a release like this. And I have a feeling this will coincide with the release, or at least it'll loosely coincide with the release of the Marvel comic. So it would not surprise me that they did work together on this as sort of a, not necessarily a dual release, because I think this comes out in July and the Ultraman comic doesn't come out till what, September? So, and it's the same cover art as the one shown off for the comic book too. For the Blu-ray sleeve is the same cover art. And I just feel like it was just it was just a way for them to put out a new product and get some extra revenue. I'm personally okay with it. I'm sort of used to these companies putting out like big titles and then later on releasing sort of a special release version a few months later. So I'm sort of used to that. I'm not necessarily surprised that they did it. It just came as came as like a surprise overall that they were going to be doing this, because I had heard rumblings about them releasing the English dub versions after Mill Creek releases all the subtitled versions, maybe in 2021 or 2022, re-releasing these as the English dubbed versions. But I think from what I understand, the problem with that is not every episode has an English dub attached to it. So maybe they release another sort of shorter Blu-ray set like this one with the English dubbed versions as another quote unquote special edition.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm looking at, because they don't have this Blu-ray set is not going to be every episode of the 66 series. This is just a best of compilation.
Right.
So, and then those are going to have the English dub audio. So to me, this feels weird. This seems like it should have been done the other way around. Like they should have put out the best of with the English dubs first and then come out later on and said, hey, we're going to release the full series of the 66 Ultraman series. And like, it just, to me, this seems backwards. It's like, well, I've already bought the entire series. What, other than just having some English dubs and that pre-premiere special thing, other than that, is there anything in this Blu-ray that's going to make it worth paying for if you've already bought the Ultraman 66 set?
Oh, in my opinion, not really. Not really.
I'm hoping that maybe they'll come out like, because they just announced this. So maybe they'll come out like maybe next week or so and say, hey, we're also adding this and this and this to the Blu-ray set, just to, maybe they'll add some more stuff to it, or say that there's going to be more stuff in it. But as of right now, I just don't see why this is worth buying if you're one who already bought that Ultraman 66 series.
Yeah.
If you're like kind of iffy on Ultraman, you're kind of new to Ultraman, you don't know where to start, and you don't know what episodes are the best and where to watch them, I can see this being beneficial to someone like that.
Right.
But then again, the Ultraman, the original or the Ultraman set has been out for so long that those people might have already even bought the original one too. So I don't know. It's just, it is really weird.
It is really weird. And when I first started collecting the Mill Creek box sets, I was getting both the Steelbook and the DVD release, and the regular Blu-ray release, one to keep and one to watch. Mm-hmm. I've since stopped doing that. I only did that with Ultra Q and the original Ultraman, because honestly, that would have just gotten way, way too expensive. Mm-hmm. Considering Steelbooks are around $25, whereas the regular Blu-rays, I want to say, rest around $21 to $23, something like it. It's a couple of dollars difference, but it adds up. Right. Honestly, this is for people, I feel like, that are already invested in Ultraman. And the price point is low enough to where most folks who love the series and who also maybe collect these Blu-rays aren't really going to blink at $19.95 or at $20. I don't think so.
Yeah. It is just an interesting thing. But yeah, so we can move on from that. We'll keep everyone updated if they give any updates on it and anything new about it comes up.
But the bottom line is, I'm excited. I will probably pick up a copy. I know a lot of folks that I've talked to a lot of folks that plan on as well. So yeah, I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah. I don't plan on picking up a copy. I have the Ultraman 66, so I don't plan on getting this one. Even with the Alex Ross comic book as part of the sleeve, the cover art as part of the Blu-ray sleeve. But yeah, anyway, moving on to the next bit of news. It is some figure news. So NECA, we've talked about this before actually on the podcast, but NECA has revealed in a tweet thread from their official Twitter page that the upcoming release for the Bio Goji, so that Godzilla 1989 and Kiryu Goji, the Godzilla 2003, the two ones that we talked about, how they have an alternative painting for them that's coming out as well, will be their final Godzilla releases for the foreseeable future. And we've talked about this on the podcast before, because they did mention this before.
Have we?
Yeah.
I couldn't remember if we had talked about, when I put this in the notes, I can't remember if this is old news or new or semi new news.
Well, it's new news that these figures are going to be the final ones. But the person who's in charge of NECA did say in an interview, probably about 3 weeks ago, a month ago, that they were going to be taking a break from Godzilla figures. So that's so we knew that they were going to be taking a break. We didn't know what their last ones were going to be and when they were going to be taking a break. And we all speculated that the reason for that break was going to be because of Playmates. In fact, I think he even mentioned that they didn't want to compete against Playmates.
Mm-hmm.
And because Playmates has the licensing for Godzilla versus Kong. So as Godzilla versus Kong starts to ramp up, they're going to have to take a break. Now, Michael, does this mean that NECA will never make another Godzilla figure ever again?
I don't think so. I honestly don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting that they said for the foreseeable future.
It is, and I've noticed there's quite a few fans of NECA that are very upset by this. And if you go, I'll put a link to the thread in the show notes. But if you go and read that thread, it gets. I mean, yeah, there's probably a reason to be upset because NECA has become sort of this fan favorite among kaiju collectors because they're affordable and their sculpts don't look half bad. And they come in these really funky alternate color versions.
Mm-hmm.
But, sort of the backlash that they've gotten is a little bit unwarranted. People were, as always, as we covered, I think during Rygo, the internet tends to freak out. A little bit more than it should. I know they did recently show pictures off, and I was going to make some Richard Simmons jokes during this segment, but I decided not to because they did show off a new Richard Simmons figure. Yes, you heard me correctly. A Richard Simmons figure by NECA is coming, and a lot of people are really mad about that they're releasing a Richard Simmons and not another Godzilla figure. But it is what it is. If they are going to halt production on Godzilla figures for the foreseeable future, expect some of the aftermarket prices on some of the current releases to go up slightly as the market tries to adapt to the idea that there are going to be no new NECA releases for the foreseeable future. The reason those prices have been able to stay pretty low is because these are mass produced figures, and they still may produce more of the sculpts they already have in their lineup. I'm not saying that they won't. I'm just saying that you will see some prices on the NECA figures that have already been released go up as the market for them gets a little bit scared that they're not going to get any more in the future.
Yeah. Now, it is important to note that NECA is not a Godzilla figure maker. Like, I mean,
No.
they make Godzilla figures, but that is not their only thing that they do.
No,
they
their
do
their primary, I believe, is Alien Predator, and then horror movies. They're big. Their horror film line of figures is huge for them. An Alien Predator, like I said, and then some other kind of they do a lot of odd kind of off the cuff pop culture references.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. They were doing a lot of pop culture ones, and that's where this Richard Simmons I almost said Gene Simmons, Richard Simmons one it kind of fits in. So this is not like it fits in with their brand. It is just the kind of the disappointment that comes from that we're not going to get any Godzilla ones for a while, but we are going to get Playmates, but then that's a mixed bag on its own. I did find the episode where we talked about it. It was the Spider-Man episode that we did with Chris from GargantuCast. And there was an interview on a YouTube channel. Randy Falk from NECA revealed that there may be a brief hiatus period soon where NECA isn't allowed to make Godzilla figures. This is due to Playmates Toys having the license for Godzilla vs. Kong and the film's owners not wanting there to be any competition, even though the companies occupy different areas of the market.
Okay. So hiatus, they're not canceling production.
Right. And that's where the foreseeable future comes in. And that's why I said, like, he said they are going to take a hiatus, but he didn't say when. And now we know when they are. Now, something else that came up in that interview, which if anybody wants to go back and listen to that episode, you can hear more of our thoughts on it. But he also shared that there are 2 new Godzilla figures that will be revealed sometime in the near future. Now, we know which ones those are. That's the Bio Goji and the Kiryu Goji,
Right.
the repaints. That's the ones that he was talking about. Additionally, the company apparently still has the rights to some non-Godzilla Toho Kaiju that they can put out during this time period. So we're still going to get some Kaiju NECA stuff. We just won't get Godzilla or Kong.
Gotcha.
For a while.
So we may get Gigan. We may get Anguirus.
I would love a NECA Gigan. Would love a NECA Gigan.
We may get Mecha Godzilla or Kiryu.
Mm-hmm.
Kiryu would make sense.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it for the news. So now let's jump into our main topic. We are closing out Kaiju Weekly's Sea Monster Month with a very special sea monster movie. And so we asked the question, what King Kong turned Godzilla film was the first in the franchise to be set on uncharted island? And we had answers from all over the place. We had a ton of answers.
We sure did.
So Giant Monster BS, another podcast that is friends of ours and a lot of fun. They sent us an answer. O'Reilly sent us an answer. O'Reilly Carroll on the Facebook group, Kaiju Groupie Facebook group. And they sent us some funny answers. Monster Island Film Vault, Nathan sent us Operation Robinson Crusoe, Big Duel in the South Seas, which we're going to talk about that title in a bit. So he sent that as his guess. Jimmy from NASA sent Godzilla versus Gilligan, which I really liked.
I had to look that up to see if it was real, because that almost sounds like something real.
It does sound like something that did happen.
It does, because we all know we have this. We all know we have Godzilla meets Batman, Godzilla meets Superman. So it would not surprise me that if there was not a comic strip out there somewhere that had Godzilla meeting the crew on Gilligan's Island.
Yeah. Daniel from the Godzilla Novelization Project on Twitter sent us Extreme Kaiju Volleyball Lecce Island Edition, directed by Jun Fukuda, which I thought was really funny. Justin Baker said Godzilla versus Kamibus, which Kamibus is the turtle kaiju from the Space Amoeba, which is funny that he went with Kamibus instead of Ganame, which is the actual giant crab.
Yep.
Like, dude, you missed a joke there. Anyway, I'm just kidding, Justin. It's great. Thank you for your answer. Elijah sent us an answer. He put his through Google Translate and sent it to us in Japanese, but I was able to untranslate it back into English, Elijah. And I can tell you use Google Translate because it's not in the right syntax for Japanese. You thought you could pull one over on me. Vineet on Twitter sent in, I thought this was funny because he just sent in a question. Hey, isn't this the one where Godzilla befriends a beautiful island girl? And isn't this also the one before Manila is born? Yes.
Technically, yes. Yeah.
And then I just want to read this one out because it gives me practice. Kyle Kawachi?
That works.
I don't know how to say your last name, Kyle. I'm sorry. On Facebook, he sent us Gojira Ebirah Mosura Nankai no Daiketo, which is Godzilla, Ebirah, Mothra, South Sea giant duel.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but then we had a bunch of people who sent in the actual answer, which was Godzilla versus a sea monster, or Ebirah, Horror of the Deep. We had Alex Sperling, G-Zilla, Robert Rolwing, Corey Norris, Brandon Hurst, or Royden, Carol, O'Reilly's brother, Michael Hargis, and the Kitterbox on Instagram. So thank you to everyone who sent in your answers. But yeah, our main topic this week is Godzilla versus the Sea Monster, aka Godzilla, or not Godzilla, Ebirah, Horror of the Deep from 1966, directed by Jun Fukuda, starring Akira Takarada, Kumi Mizuno, Chotaro Togen, Hideo Sunozuka, Haruo Nakajima as Godzilla, and Hiroshi Sakita as Ebirah. And the plot breakdown, real quick, for this movie is: a young man steals a boat to find his brother, but he and his shipmates become shipwrecked on a mysterious island inhabited by a giant sea monster and a slumbering Godzilla.
Okay.
So, getting into our opening thoughts, what are your opening thoughts on this movie, Michael?
So when I first turned this on to watch it, it was a nostalgia trip for sure. It was. I remember watching this movie growing up. Now the version I have has to be the Criterion Channel version, because the quality of the video is just too good. And the quality of the dub, yes, I watched the dub. Don't hate me. The quality of the dub, although questionable, does sound nice. The Dolby, what sounds like stereo audio, or I'm not sure what they were using for their audio source, but it sounds really nice, and the picture quality is crisp and beautiful. The colors really pop. But anyway, this movie is a nostalgia trip for me, for sure. I grew up on this movie. It would come on, I think, AMC or TMC when I was a kid, and I had an old VHS recording of it as well. And as a child, this was one of my favorite Godzilla movies. What did you think about it when you first put it on, Travis? What did you think about it?
Oh, I'm right there with you with the nostalgia trip, because I have said before, I can't really remember what my first Godzilla movie that I've ever watched was, because it was so long ago and I was so young. But more than likely, it was this movie. It was either this movie or Son of Godzilla, because those two were the VHSs that were the oldest of the ones that we had. They were the ones we had the longest. So I can imagine them being probably the first ones I saw. So this being one of the first Godzilla movies I've ever seen, and just brought back so many memories of my dad and watching this movie with my dad. And it was such a nostalgia trip. I did not go into this thinking that I was going to feel that way, because I was like, oh, I've seen this movie. It's fine. I'm going to, watch it and enjoy it. And then I was like, oh man, this just brings me back to being a little kid again.
So I 100% agree. I do. I don't know what else to say about my initial impressions, except for this is a nostalgia trip. But I'm going to do my best, Travis, not to let nostalgia cloud my judgment on this particular discussion.
Well, I'm telling you right now, nostalgia clouded my judgment, because
that's why we do this show, because it hopefully it's well balanced.
Yeah. So getting into likes or dislikes, what are some things that you really enjoy about this movie?
I like how different it was. I like how different this film is from the ones that came before it, because before, I think the film that came right immediately before this one was Invasion of Astro Monster.
Mm-hmm.
And up to that point, we had sort of Tokyo destruction films. It was all, kaiju destroying cities. And for them to kind of go over and make this on an island, although that was for budgetary reasons, it really worked. It was really interesting. And I can see why this film stands out to a lot of folks because of that, because it is just so different than films that had come before it, because of its location. Its cast is really phenomenal, honestly. It's in terms of Godzilla in terms of Godzilla and kaiju films, this really has an all-star cast, because you've got Akira Takarada, Kumi Mizuno, and some others. And yeah, I just really like how this one stands apart from the films that had come before it, before this particular one. Yeah.
Right. And it makes sense because this is Jun Fukuda's first time directing a Godzilla movie. He goes on to direct a lot more Godzilla movies, but this was his first one. And yeah, like you said, the budget was reduced, so they had to get around it and change the location that they usually film Godzilla. You know, it's not destroying cities, so they didn't have to build a lot of miniatures. And then you also have completely different music than what we had gotten used to, because the music in this is not Ifukube. It's
Right.
oh,
Sato.
Sato, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it is different. It is completely different from its predecessors, and I like it. I do like that it's different. I like to call this movie Godzilla Goes Tropical, because it like they fully embrace the idea of it being this island
Mhm.
and the whole tropical nature of it. And at the time in Japan, the Hawaiian shirts and kind of like beach boogie style was around, and so that came through in this. And I really love it. I really love the overall tone of this movie and how different it is. One thing that really stands out to me, of course, in this movie is Takarada-san,
Of course. Of course.
because I mean, come on, I love Akira Takarada, and I listened or I watched this movie with the subtitles because I had to hear Takarada's voice. I couldn't have some weird American speaking for Takarada. I had to be able to hear Takarada-san.
Right. Well, let me back up just for a second, Travis, because you said that this was Jun Fukuda's first film. I think this
Mhm.
was his second film, right?
This was
Because I'm looking at the filmography on Godzilla.com, and it says that it was Jun Fukuda who actually did Invasion of the Astro Monster.
no. When I looked it up, this was listed as his first. He was an assistant director on that one.
Maybe because
Um,
I'm looking at Invasion of Astro Monster here. It says executive producer Tanaka, director Jun Fukuda, screenplay by Sekizawa, and that's all it really says. It just it gives you the cast list, but that's it. Yeah, it's listed as technically his first film, but you know, I just was curious about that because I always assumed that this was his first film also.
it is. I'm double checking it, and Ishiro Honda
Okay,
was the director for Invasion of Astro Monster. So
gotcha.
they just got their info wrong, because he might have been, because I know he was an assistant director for a little bit on a couple of films. So maybe Jun Fukuda helped as an assistant director,
Hmm.
but no, because no, I'm seeing Koji Kajita was the assistant director. So no, so I don't know where they got that information, because this was definitely Jun Fukuda's first film, and you can tell, you can definitely tell
Hmm.
this is nothing like anything that had come before it. And the tone and the music and that's another reason, like Invasion of Astro Monster, the had Ifukube doing the soundtrack. The reason why Ifukube did not come back for Godzilla versus the Sea Monster was because Jun Fukuda had taken over as director, and he had never worked with Ifukube before. He had worked with Sato before, and so he wanted to work with Sato,
Hmm.
with the person he was familiar with. So it wouldn't make sense for Invasion of Astro Monster to be his first film, because then why would he switch out composers if he, that wouldn't be true,
Right.
because he would have worked with the Fukube in the last movie. So
Right.
no, this is definitely his first movie, first Godzilla movie.
Okay. Yeah, you can definitely tell the difference between Honda's directing style and Fukuda's directing style. How about said Sato? And then you could also tell the difference between Ifukube and Sato's musical style, because in this film it's very upbeat, it's very jazzy, it's got that Beach Boys
Hmm.
jazz style to it. You know, everything's just really kind of I would say everything is in this film is very youthful, and I think that kind of reflects the direction of what we would see in Godzilla films after this one, where they shifted to a more youthful style, a more family friendly style of filmmaking.
Yeah, youthful actually is a great description of this film. Like the difference between the previous films in the Godzilla franchise and this one. Yeah, this one is definitely embraces the Japanese youth style and kind of fads that were around at that time. And so yeah, this
Right.
definitely has a more youthful feeling to it. So yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Moving on to one thing I really liked in this movie was the Red Bamboo Army as a villain. Now, when we reviewed King Kong Escapes, which we'll talk about how this movie and King Kong Escapes are tied in a little bit, but I talked about how much I loved the villains in that, because you don't usually get these like super villains in Toho movies. You don't get like the human supervillains in Toho movies. You know, they're usually greedy businessmen or they're misguided scientists, things like that. So to just have an evil organization with just the general plan of taking over the world, I kind of like that. It was so comic booky, so cartoony, and I like it. I like it for that reason.
Yeah. And it's actually a direct sort of a direct reference to communist China, or red China in this film.
Yeah. So is there any other likes that you want to bring up before we move on to dislikes?
You know, I like how like I said, I like how youthful this film is. I like how it feels different from all the other Godzilla films that would come before it, and I think that works to its benefit on in some ways, but it also hurts it a little bit for me. We can kind of touch on this in dislikes. There are times in this there are parts in this film that don't really feel like a Godzilla film, or they just feel a little off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things I do want, just one little moment that's in this movie that I really like, is the characters trying to decide whether to wake up Godzilla or not. I like that it wasn't just an instant, oh yeah, let's wake up Godzilla. Like there was a debate that went on between them of like, should we? Because like Godzilla is dangerous. Do we really want to wake him up? Yeah. And I kind of like that. I like it.
Like they're choosing sort of the lesser of two evils. It's either you let the Red Bamboo continue to build this heavy water plant and then eventually get their hands on nuclear weapons, or you awaken Godzilla and take the risk of him destroying it, but also, you know, he's awake now. He can unleash his havoc on the world again.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just sort of the moral debate that they have to have between themselves. And you're right, it's a really interesting conversation that they had amongst themselves during this film.
Yeah. So we can get into dislikes now. What are some things you don't like about this movie or didn't like in watching it this time?
Wow. Okay. So, and this is going to sound really trivial to some, but I really thought that the Mothra puppet looked like trash.
Oh yeah.
It really didn't look good at all. You can tell. And this is the same, when I was looking it up, this is the same puppet from Mothra versus Godzilla from 1964. So this puppet looks like it had been beaten up, and then maybe not stored properly, because you can, like, her fur is all ruffled. It looks matted. It looks like it's been sitting in a storage unit for a couple of years, which it probably
It probably was.
It probably was sitting in a storage unit somewhere, and getting beaten on by the heat and harsh weather condition changes. And it just didn't look good. It just didn't look good at all. And neither did the Goji suit. And I know we'll touch on this a little bit later, and because this suit was from Astro Monster, right? This is the same one from Astro Monster, the Daisenso Goji.
Yeah.
And that suit took a beating in that film as well, because in 65, the 65 Godzilla from Invasion of Astro Monster is one of my favorite Godzilla suits. I feel like I just feel like I like how crisp and how clean it looks. But this one, however, doesn't look that great. It looks really beaten up, but that's probably because of all the water scenes where this film was shot in.
Yeah. This suit was very ratty. It was very falling. It's not as rough as future Godzilla suits are in future movies. But this one is really rough. I agree. The Godzilla suit looks really rough, and the Mothra prop was really rough, and those were two things that really stood out to me while watching this movie.
Well, since you love Mothra, and since we're kind of on the subject, what did you think about the new Mothra song for this movie?
Oh, I didn't like it. I don't like it. I miss the original Masaraya. Masara. Like, that's the one I want.
Yeah. This sounded more, I'm trying to think of the right word to say. It was different. It was not the same ethereal kind of worship, for lack of a better word to use. It didn't sound like the same. It didn't have that same worshipful tone.
It sounded more like just a song instead of like a plead, and like the words to it are them pleading with Mothra to wake up, but the tone of the song doesn't sound like that, whereas the other version sounds more like them pleading to Mothra to wake up, come help us, and everything. So that classic Ifukube one, I'm gonna always go with that one.
It's really bad that the canvas painting of Mothra looked better than the puppet herself.
Oh yeah. The rotoscoped animated little one at the very end of the movie looked better than the puppet.
I want to say that was probably taken from. I think that ending scene was stock footage, if I'm not mistaken. That is from 1961 Mothra.
Wow!
But I'm not. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that scene is stock footage at the very end there.
It probably was. Some other things that really detract, which we're going to get into now. This will kind of intro us into talking about this, but on the Mothra note, the fact that Mothra is featured so little in this movie almost makes it pointless to have her in it at all.
Yeah,
like that. Yeah, that just seems like, what's the point in even having Mothra when you don't really use Mothra that much? But anyway, the one thing that really detracted from this film to me was the fact that Godzilla just acts out of character. He does not act like Godzilla, and like you said earlier, it just does not feel like a Godzilla film a lot of times, and there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is this wasn't supposed to be a Godzilla film.
You're right.
Yeah. So we talked about in King Kong Escapes that Rankin and Bass, who were co-producing the King Kong animated television show in the 60s, they wanted to do a live action version of that show. And so they worked with Toho and they worked up a script. This was the script that they came up with. This was called Operation Robinson Crusoe, King Kong versus Ebirah, or Ebirah. It wasn't close enough to the cartoon for Rankin and Bass. They kind of felt like this was too off of what the cartoon was based on, or the storyline of the cartoon. And so they pushed this script aside, and they end up redoing it and creating King Kong Escapes, which kind of followed the animated show more closely.
Right.
Whereas this film, Toho decided to switch out King Kong with Godzilla. But instead of adapting the script more for Godzilla, they just, basically pulled King Kong out and just plugged in Godzilla and just ran with it. So the times when Godzilla is acting out of character, it makes sense with that context because this was supposed to be King Kong. Why doesn't he use his fire breath, his atomic breath when he's fighting Ebirah at the beginning of the movie, or towards the beginning of the movie? And that's because it was supposed to be King Kong. King Kong doesn't have atomic breath. And why does he take a liking to the female character in this? Well, because it was supposed to be King Kong, and King Kong's known for that. Yeah. So I understand why it doesn't feel like a Godzilla movie and why Godzilla acts out of character. That doesn't change the fact that is a huge problem in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts?
It's definitely jarring. I'll be honest with you. Now that it's something you don't really notice as a kid because you don't at the time. We were just watching these films just to enjoy them, right? And but it's something you notice more now as you're watching some of these films back, especially since you're watching these films in a lot of cases back to back, and you notice these little things like how how anthropomorphic Godzilla was in his emotions, and how he sort of reflected the emotion toward Dio, the female protagonist. Like you said, that's a trope of the King Kong series, him being attracted to a young woman. Now, they didn't take it as far as, they probably could have. I'm glad they didn't. It was just sort of a brief moment of them meeting eyes, and you can tell that Godzilla is infatuated with her, but they don't take it to the full extent that they could have. And I think that's because they realized if they did, it would become very, very obvious what they did with the script.
Yeah, they didn't go full 76 King Kong.
No, they didn't. And there's a couple of, I thought it was interesting too, because this is one of the only Godzilla films where, and it actually may be one of the only Godzilla. Well, no, okay, no, that was Anguirus didn't have any special abilities either. Where Godzilla's opponent does not have any real special abilities. If this were a true, and I hate to use this word, if this were a true Godzilla movie, Ebirah would have been wasted during the first fight because atomic breath, boom, done. But they decided to play volleyball instead. And that's not really knocking the movie as a whole. I like I said, I like the uniqueness of this film. It's different than what it came before, but it's clearly obvious that this is not intended, that this was originally not intended to be a Godzilla film. It was intended to be a King Kong film that was later adapted for Godzilla. And then I think it was one point you brought up that when Godzilla encounters Mothra, Godzilla acts as if he's never seen Mothra before, whereas it was just 2 films prior that they had an altercation.
Right.
And that just kind of shows that if you weren't really paying attention, or if you didn't know sort of the history there, you would just say, okay, it's a giant flying butterflies coming in. Godzilla thinks it's an enemy. He's going to attack it, one and done. I mean, that's not many people would really read that much into it, but knowing what you and I know about films prior, and this film in particular, it's obvious that this was not supposed to be a Godzilla film.
Yeah. And one little, which I think is really funny too, one obvious point of that in the movie is the fact that they use lightning to wake Godzilla up, because in King Kong versus Godzilla, we've already seen that King Kong can be supercharged with electricity.
Right.
But the reason why it was done in King Kong versus Godzilla was because that was originally supposed to be Frankenstein versus Godzilla, and they switched it out but left that scene in, which makes it makes sense that Frankenstein would be supercharged with electricity and get more powerful from electricity, but they left it in so King Kong gets charged with electricity, so they decided to use that same thing again in this movie, but then they switched out King Kong with Godzilla, so now Godzilla's getting charged with electricity. It's just this weird little thing that is kind of funny.
It is, but I'll be honest with you, it makes more sense in a way for Godzilla to be able to be recharged from electricity than it does necessarily King Kong, though. But I know I see why they did it, and I see because they're bringing continuity back from 62. They're bringing continuity around, from 62. But before we kind of go any further with this, I did want to mention it was as part of something I actually liked about the film. It was the shots. I think it was toward the beginning of the film, when we first see the Ebirah claw. That really is a fantastic effect. That whole scene is a really fantastic effect. It is very believable. You almost forget that is this little, probably wooden toy boat in the water in a wade pool with this giant claw that's being animated by someone under the stage or wherever they were at. It really is a fantastic effect, and so I thought it would be a disservice not to point that out, because I don't want it to sound like there's nothing about this movie that we don't like.
Oh yeah, no, that was a fantastic scene. I definitely had that in my likes. Something else that I did want to circle back around to some more likes, so I'm glad that you did that, because we did briefly talk about the cast. Of course, I love Takarada. So Takarada-san, him playing against type, he's not playing a very heroic character. He's kind of playing a little bit of a scumbag in this movie. Is kind of cool. I like that, because Takarada is, in previous to this, he was the hero who was just, because he was such a heartthrob. But then, to play against that type and be kind of a more of a scummy character was really interesting. But let's talk about, we did on the back channel a little bit, but let's talk about Kumi Mizuno, because she, prior to this movie, she had been in Invasion of Astro Monster, and she had been in Frankenstein Conquers the World, and somehow in this movie she looks younger than what she did in those movies, and those movies were years before this one.
Yeah. I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday when we were both watching the movie. And it's interesting how the movie prior to this, she looks so much older. Now, granted, she still is a very beautiful woman in Astro Monster and in Frankenstein versus Baragon, but for some reason she just looks so young here. It almost in a way doesn't even look like her, and so it's probably maybe a little bit of that fake tan they gave her.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That fake tan's probably helping it out a lot.
the fake tan, maybe a little bit of makeup, the way they, her outfit, they sort of a more form-fitting outfit to make her appear younger. Typically brighter colors, like they used in this film, will make you appear a little bit younger. It was not off-putting. It was really,
it was just interesting.
Because it really doesn't even look like her.
I had to be reminded that it was her, because I was like, I forgot for a moment that it was even her. Right. That being said, her acting, just like always, because she is a good actress. She's my favorite part of Godzilla versus Baragon, or not Godzilla versus Baragon, Frankenstein versus Baragon.
Right.
But in this, her acting is again really good, and she's smart and capable. And even though she's not a naive Islander. She's an Islander who's not out of her depths. She can handle herself, right. And I really liked her character in this. I think she did a great job. Like you said, all of the characters worked really well in this.
Yeah, I think the cast is really fantastic, and I think if I'm not mistaken, wasn't the cast working on this, and while Honda and his team were working on King Kong Escapes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, it was. It is really, it's a great cast. I do love it. It is one of the things that Jun Fukuda does really well in all of his movies, is he uses the kaiju action to punctuate the human drama. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and that's it's not completely unique to him. I mean, Ishiro Honda definitely does that too, but usually the human drama in Honda's films, the human drama is tied directly to the drama of the kaiju, whereas in Fukuda films, the human drama doesn't necessarily cross over with the kaiju drama or the kaiju fights until it does. You know, it's like,
Mhm.
you know, it's like there's nothing about the human drama that ties it directly to Godzilla
Yeah.
until they use Godzilla to escape from the Red Bamboo Army. So that is a style of Fukuda's directing that you see in this one and also in his future movies.
It is, absolutely.
Anything else that you want to bring up before we move on to our final thoughts and our Godzuki rating?
Um, well, just I guess this would be considered a fun fact. In the fun facts, we have the underwater scenes were filmed indoors through a water-filled tank. Some scenes were not shot. Some scenes were shot with Godzilla underwater as well, which is one of the reasons why the suit looked so trashed by the end of this film. So yeah, they were actually shooting things underwater in a tank, which lends to its believability. But it's better than, you know, superimposing these kaiju against a green screen. But
Right.
that's one of
Yeah.
the reasons why, you know, the suits look so bad. But especially toward the end of the film, especially where the last 15 minutes I said were probably the best parts of the film, when all the action, when the building's getting ready to blow up because, you know, they set off the reactor. You
Mhm.
can really feel the tension in those moments where they're trying to escape the island. Mothra's on her way to save everybody. Godzilla shows up. He's already defeated Ebirah, but he stands in the way of, you know, everyone escaping because you think he's going to battle Mothra. That doesn't actually happen. And then the tension of Godzilla. Now the protagonists now feel sorry for Godzilla, so they try to they yell for him to leave the island, which he eventually does, whether you want to believe he heard them or not. So
Yeah. Yeah. Another fun fact that we can throw in there too is that while filming this movie, they did lend the Godzilla suit, well, at least the head of the Godzilla suit, over to Tsuburaya Productions to be used in an episode of Ultraman where it was grafted onto the suit from Mothra versus Godzilla and made into the
yep,
monster
that's true.
Jiras.
Yeah, I was trying to think. If I knew they used the head. I was just trying to think of which Godzilla suit they lended for the body, or if the one for Jiros was just a modified 66.
Yeah, there was the head of 66 and the body of Masugoji.
All right, best of two worlds. There we go.
Yep. Yeah, so now we can get into our Godzuki score. For anyone who is new to our podcast, we like to rank our movies out of 5 Godzukis because we like to embrace the silly side of kaiju movies. And so we use the Great Godzuki, Godzilla's bumbling nephew from the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, as our yardstick for these movies. So, Michael, what is your Godzuki score for this movie?
Okay. Well, let me read my final thoughts, and then I'll get into my overall Godzuki score for that. Which I think if I give you my thoughts first, that'll give some context as to why I ended up with the score I did.
Okay.
So if I base this review on nostalgia alone, I would give it a 5 out of 5. But I can't. If I'm being honest. That's not saying that this I don't like the film. With Jun Fukuda taking the franchise in a new direction and into more tropical surroundings, it's a nice change of pace and one I really appreciate. This film is unlike what we've seen before in the franchise up to this point. The human story takes center stage, with the kaiju action playing second fiddle for the most part. The scenes where we get Godzilla and Ebirah are fun, but don't feel overly satisfying as they did in even Astro Monster or King Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. As much as I hate to admit it, even though this movie had Godzilla in it, it didn't really feel like a Godzilla movie to me. That's mainly because of what we talked about when we mentioned it was originally planned not to be a Godzilla movie, but a Kong film instead. As much love as I have for this film, it's still not enough for me it's still not enough for it to crack the top 10 of my Godzilla list. Although I will say it's not far behind, hovering somewhere within the top 15, mainly for how unique it was to the franchise at this point. So with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and give this film a 3.5 out of 5 if I look at it objectively.
Okay. I completely respect that. That is a completely respectable thing. For me, I really enjoyed this movie. It brought back so many good memories of being a kid and watching it with my dad. I love the island setting. It was definitely a breath of fresh air to the series. And I like the change in directing styles. It's exciting to see a new take on Godzilla, in the series when you get into this. I like Jun Fukuda's way, like I said, of how he uses the kaiju action to punctuate the human drama or the human, story. And I think that's really great. I enjoy those. That being said, I do have a lot of the same problems that you have with the movie. Of course, it's not a perfect film. It doesn't feel like a Godzilla film at times. But all of that being said, just because a big part of my score comes down to nostalgia, because I just love this movie as a kid and I love it now. And it reminds me of being a kid. So I give it a 4 out of 5.
Okay.
And it's probably my second favorite Fukuda directed Godzilla film.
Okay.
The first being Gigan.
Okay. All right. And that is completely it's completely understandable. I can see why people like this film. I don't hate the film. It's not my favorite, but I actually legitimately like the film. But I just had to, for the purposes of this review, I had to take it in with a more objective eye. You know.
Yeah, I understand. Well, let's jump into our final segment for this episode, and let's try to quickly get through it. It is our Kaiju Clash!
Kaiju Clash! Fight!
So we talked about the results from the last Kaiju Clash, being the Biollante won and Legion lost. So following our rule of loser goes first, and the next time, I'm going first on this one.
Okay, go for it.
So this time around, we're pitting Gigan against Gamera, but only the Showa versions of the characters. So I have Gigan. Gigan is cybernetically enhanced, which means he is just built for fighting. He is armored to the beak and full of sharp weapons and sharp edges, and he is so much fun to watch. He's very fast for his size, and he's able to draw blood from Godzilla, something that no other kaiju was able to do before that. He survived a fight with Godzilla twice and was alive to tell the tale. So I'm going with Gigan. Gigan would own Gamera, the Showa Gamera.
Okay. Yeah, and we did set those stipulations. It had to be the Showa Gamera, because if we're speaking realistically, if I would have chosen Heisei Gamera, there would be no contest. So you're saying that Gigan was the first kaiju to ever draw blood from Godzilla. But Godzilla, as much as I like the big guy, doesn't have this massive carapace on his back. He has a durable hide, don't get me wrong, but he doesn't have this armor guarding him on his body. And Gamera is fully able, and we have seen it even in the Showa era, he is able to take a beating and still keep coming. What the main benefit, the main ability that Gamera has that I really feel like would put him over the top and propel him to victory here is the fact that he never gives up. Even though it is a trope of the franchise, I will admit that Gamera typically loses the first battle. And Gamera has bled a lot. I'm not arguing
Yes.
that. I'm not going to argue that. Gamera has bled a lot, but Gamera is also very durable, and he also has the ability to heal himself. We've seen it. We saw it in Gauss. We saw it in in his battle with Barugon. We saw it even in, I believe, in his battle with Giron. He has the ability to recover from pretty devastating attacks. And I would assume the way he would tackle Gigan is using a similar approach as to what Anguirus did in Godzilla versus Gigan, where he would use that carapace to his advantage and just ram Gigan as hard and as much as he possibly can to knock him off of his feet, and then eventually use his fire breath to burn him alive. And if we all know, let's just be honest, Showa Gigan is not the bravest kaiju of the bunch either. I imagine that Showa Gigan, if met with any kind of opposition at all from Gamera, would turn tail and run fairly quickly. Gigan is an opportunist. He is not a leader among the kaiju monster army, however you want to say that. Gigan is a follower. He is just a foot soldier. He's a hired gun. He's a mercenary. But you know what? He's not a very brave mercenary. Let's just say that. So I would say that if Gamera puts up any fight whatsoever, Gigan, for lack of a better term, is going to chicken out.
I like the chicken reference. Big chicken. What you consider cowardice, I consider tactical retreat. We're talking about a kaiju that survived fighting Godzilla twice. That is something that not many kaiju can put on their resume. Gamera, yes, has the carapace. The carapace has been shown to be able to be punctured by sharp weapons. In Gamera versus Giron, when Giron attacks Gamera with his big bladed nose, it is shown to actually draw blood from his shell. So that shell is not as durable as you'd like to think. And like I said, Gigan is full of sharp edges. He has that saw blade in his stomach that can rip through Gamera like nothing else. Another thing that Gigan has going for him is his ability to fly. He can fly, but not only can he
Gamera can fly too. Don't forget that.
Yes, Gamera can fly, but Gamera flies a lot slower than Gigan does, because Gigan is able to travel from another galaxy to Earth relatively quickly, whereas Gamera had trouble keeping up with a spaceship in Giron that was just flying to another planet within the same solar system. So Gigan is definitely faster. So I feel like Gamera would be overwhelmed with Gigan's speed as he flew by and used that chainsaw blade stomach thing to just rip right into Gamera.
Okay, so all Gamera has to do is just shell up. And I know that's a cop-out. I get that. But really, all Gamera has to do here is retreat inside of his shell and pick his moments. And I really think that Gamera will choose the right moment to latch his turtly claws into Gigan and just rip that beak right off of his face. Because let's face it, Travis, the only reason Gigan even stood a chance against Godzilla is because he had King Ghidorah right there by his side. And the only reason he had a chance, I will say this, and I will stand by it, is because he had Megalon right there by his side as his tag team partner. Gigan cannot win a battle on his own. He has to have help. I do not believe whatsoever that Gigan has the guts or the fortitude to withstand a one-on-one assault from a gigantic flying fidget spinner like Gamera.
See, I view it as Gigan held his own in those fights despite being teamed up with Megalon. Because to me, Megalon was more of a hindrance than he was an ally.
That may be an outlier. That may actually be an outlier situation. Whereas I will concede a little bit that Megalon was not very helpful. But he was helpful enough. He was helpful enough where his attacks seemed way more effective at bringing down Jet Jaguar or Godzilla than even Gigan's did.
Well, we ultimately cannot come to a consensus between the two of us, so we are going to have to leave it up to our listeners to make the decision. So, Michael, how about you let the listeners know how they can help us decide who wins in this epic battle?
Absolutely. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the clip, we're going to take this portion of the episode, we're going to upload it to YouTube as its own separate clip. And let's just say if you're not subscribed to our Kaiju Weekly YouTube channel, you're missing out because you're missing clips just like this that we only put on YouTube. We're not making a separate podcast. We're not making bonus episodes for these Kaiju Clashes. We're only putting them on YouTube. So you have to subscribe to the YouTube channel to get these videos or to get these audio. Anyway, we're going to post the audio to YouTube. We're going to post it to the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group along with a public poll. And if you're a part of the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group, you can vote between either the Showa Gigan or the better choice, which is the Showa Gamera. So if you're a part of that group, I recommend you join. It's a fantastic group. We do a lot of fun things there just like this, but we're going to post that poll to the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group, as well as we're going to post a poll to the Kaiju Weekly Twitter page, and you're going to be able to vote there. We take results from both Facebook and Twitter, and we combine them together to get an overall score. And that, I feel like that is the best way we can handle it to get a better consensus of what the community is saying, because not everybody who follows us on Twitter is in the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group and vice versa. So it's a good cross section of the fan base to get a good representation of who they think would win this epic battle between Showa Gamera and Showa Gigan. So please look out for that. Again, subscribe to the Kaiju Groupie. I'm sorry, not the Kaiju Groupie. Subscribe to the Kaiju Weekly YouTube channel. Join the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group and follow Kaiju Weekly on Twitter for all of these polls and fun information so that you can be a part of this conversation and ultimately propel me and Gamera to victory.
Boo. 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 Okay.
That's what you get. That's what you get for letting me do the promo, Travis. Maybe you should do it next time yourself.
All right. Well, that is it for this episode. So before we close out, I want to go ahead and ask the trivia question for next week's episode, something that's going to hint to next week. Now, I do want to say just right off the bat, I am going to be moving house very soon. So we are going to be recording these episodes in advance. So we may not be able to cover the news as well as what we have been, which some people may be relieved of because they may not like the news segment, but we're still going to try to cover the news as best we can, but just giving you guys a heads up. The trivia question for next week's episode: what film is loosely based on the 1900 Japanese adventure novel, The Undersea Warship, A Fantastic Tale of Island Adventure?
Ooh, I like that. I don't know if I know this one myself.
So you can send your answers over to us on Twitter at Kaiju Weekly. You can also do it on Instagram at Kaiju Weekly Pod. You can also email us kaijuweekly@gmail.com. You can also do it on the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group. Thank you to everyone for listening to this week's episode. Again, if you want to follow us on all the social medias, do it on all of those platforms, because we're on all of those platforms, including YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because we want to get over 100 subscribers by the end of this month. Do that. You can send questions, comments, or answers to trivia questions to our email, kaijuweekly@gmail.com. You can also find us at the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group. Also follow at the Kaiju Groupie Pod, or at Kaiju Groupie Pod, which is Michael, and the Kaiju Groupie on Twitter and Instagram. We want to say a big thank you to Brian, Shijir, and Thorax for supporting us on Patreon. You can also support the podcast at patreon.com/Kaiju Weekly Pod, or simply by leaving us a review on iTunes. And so, until next time, we're going to say, help control the sea monster population. Have your giant shrimp spayed or neutered.
Sayonara.
Bye, guys.